Hello, and welcome back to the Elevate Your Running podcast. This is Coach Sarah, and today I want to talk all about some phrases that you can use at your next race, on your next starting line. We are, believe it or not, coming up on race season. We have the Mesa Marathon, half marathon, coming up in just a few days. It's such a great race experience. It's in Mesa, Arizona. I've been lucky enough to run the marathon and the 10K there over the last few years. It's a fast course. It's typically great weather. It's a slight down unless you're running the marathon. There's a few miles of uphill in the first 10K. And it can get a little warm in the marathon at the very end in the last 10K. But for those running the 10K and the half marathon, it's an excellent, excellent course. I think if you're looking for a breakthrough day, you're looking for a PR day, that is a great course to do it. Now, it's coming up in a few days. So chances are if you're not signed up and you haven't been training for it, you're probably not running it this year, and that's okay. All of these phrases I want to talk about today, you're going to remind yourself on the start line of your next race. Now, these are also phrases that you can use in training, because I'm a big believer that how you show up in training is also how you show up on race day. And one of the most important things that you can do on thinking through how you want to be, how you want to show up, how you want to respond on race day is by practicing that in training. Because anytime our body is under stress, our mind is under stress, where chances are we're not going to show up the way that we want to show up in that moment unless we've rehearsed, we've practiced, we have a really good, solid plan on how to flow through anything that comes up in our way. So I'm really excited about this. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know I'm a big mantra person, and I have mantras in each training cycle. I'm a big believer in having a different mantra for each training cycle, because each training cycle is very different from the last. Even if you're running the same style of courses, I think how you show up as an athlete is very different. So the mantras get to be reflective of that, and they also get to be different. But I'm also a big believer in those, positive phrases that are going to get you through the day. I haven't been shy about talking about things that I have used in my own training in the course of over the last few years, really. And notably, like, just over the last few weeks of like saying out loud, like, yes, you can do this, as I'm going into, 5K intervals. And I think it's really, really important to build yourself up, and as well, keeping yourself grounded, keeping yourself calm. These phrases are also going to help you do that, because what we know to be true about when we show up to running, when we show up to racing, is that if we can show up confident, relaxed, maybe some nerves are part of it. It means that you care. I remember standing at the start line of the Chicago Marathon last fall, and I wasn't nervous about running this race at all, because I really had no time to train for it. I had very little time to train for it. And I was so focused on just not getting worse as I was running through plantar fasciitis and really trying to hold the level of pain to a certain degree at a level that I felt comfortable with, that I was so focused on that I really didn't have time to get nervous until I was standing in the corral at the start line. And I was like, oh, this is really happening. And, like, I'm running 26.2 miles today. Like, this is really, really happening today, right now, in about 5 minutes. This is wild. So I think it's a really fun part of it that you can look to for it to be fun, because it's part of running, it's part of training, it's part of racing. But I think it's also really important to show up confident and to show up grounded. I think confidence comes from training. I think that's a lot of it. Now, if you're working with a coach, your confidence can also come from your coach. But I think we all know the training that works, the training that clicks, the training that's like, oh yeah, this feels a lot different than any other time I've been going after a goal. I specifically remember when I was going after my sub 90, the first time I was working with a different coach other than Nell. The second time I was going into the Houston half, and it ended up being a really warm and humid morning. PR chances were out the window. Now, when I actually ran sub 90 and I ran 88:01 in Indianapolis in 2023, 2023, which feels like a long time ago. So I think it's probably time to get back to the half marathon distance. I remember thinking to myself, when people would say like something about like running sub 90, I'm like, in my mind, I was like, oh, yeah, it's not a matter of if I'm running sub 90. It's a matter of like how far under 90 I'm running. And that's the confidence piece to training because my training was going really well. I was running 640s pretty smooth at altitude. And that's what I eventually ended up running at Indy. That was my average for the day, 640. And it was very different from the other two training cycles where for a sub 90 half, you're looking to average 650, 651. And the 650 to 651 was just feeling like hard, you know? And then you're like, okay, I hope like with taper and like with rest, this just feels better. And then, I think I ran at for my first attempt at grandma's half marathon in that would have been in 22. I ran like a 132 high, which was not it. That was not a good day. And then for the Houston half, I ran a 131.01 in pretty humid hot conditions, although my training wasn't like something I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to bust through 90 minutes." I felt like I could have run under 90. But Indianapolis was a much different experience going into it. I was very, very, very confident about what I could do, what I was capable of. And the proof is in the pudding, right? Now, staying grounded, I think, is a really important piece to training. I think it's a really important piece to being a smart and mature runner. And I also think it's a piece to racing well. So, staying grounded is one of the things that I've been talking a little bit about through social media, whether it's in stories highlighting athletes that I coach, or if it's in some social media posts on the Elevate site, talking about staying grounded because it's one of the things that I noticed a lot with athletes is how worked up they can get over something so minute or so small in the grand scheme of all of it, or how anxious they can get over a workout that really means nothing, or a workout that, not that no workout means, not that workouts mean nothing, but like, it's a data point. It's one day. We're going to have days that are just hard. That's part of it. And got to just like roll with it. I think you don't have to roll with it. And I find athletes sometimes don't. And that can be a really difficult place to be when you're in training and you're going after big goals. So to stay grounded is one of the biggest pieces that you can do in training. It's probably one of the things that I'm most proud about of myself as an athlete is that I do stay pretty grounded, even on days that are hard, on days that suck, on days I don't want to show up, on days that I'm just like maybe annoyed in the moment because I am known to do that. Like maybe I remember running in City Park last year, which is in Denver. And if you know City Park, it's like they have like this inner loop of pavement, very similar to Wash Park. And then they have like this outside exterior of some pavement, some gravel. It has a lot of like, it's not flat. I wouldn't call it hilly, but there's definitely some elevation gain and loss to it. Anyways, I remember doing some tempo inside of that park on like the inner part of that park. And I had practiced in the summer of 2021. I ran a lot of my tempo there. And I never really loved that park. And I'm so sorry for anyone listening who loves City Park. I love it for different reasons. Running tempo, if I had to choose, I would choose Wash Park. But that's because it's reliable, it's consistent. I know what I'm getting with Wash Park, where City Park is none of those things. And you might show up and run tempo, and there could be a race, which happens a lot. They have like these gates inside the park that could be closed. So you can't get through and you have to like go on the grass. I call it steeple chasing, like you have to go around. There's a lot of like interesting aspects to the park. Like there's a lot of like roundabouts and circles, and that's really tough when you're running tempo. And I remember last year, I think it was like early summer before I got hurt. I was running tempo there and I was just like so annoyed. I was so annoyed. I just didn't want to be running tempo there. It was like, it must have been like a spring day because I remember it was like really warm and I wasn't heat acclimated yet. And I was just like heating up. I got out much later than I wanted to get out. So like everything was just like not it, you know, when you're like trying to run this like long tempo, which, you know, my coach was known to give me, like not easy. And I remember getting so annoyed in the moment because I was just like, I don't want to run on gravel that's like all wet and soggy. I don't want to have to like steeplechase over fences. I don't want to have to like run these roundabouts. I don't want to run up these like slight inclines. Now, I also wasn't feeling super strong that day, and I think that was a lot of it. But after the fact, anytime I have those days where I'm just like, this is like not it for so many different reasons, afterwards, I'm usually like, whatever, I'll just do better next time. And I stay pretty grounded after the fact. So I guess maybe my homework is like staying grounded in the moment when I'm in those like really frustrating situations that I don't necessarily want to be in. But at the end of the day, like I've told my athletes that I coach in group coaching, those experiences really do help us. I think it's an interesting place to be as an athlete because you have to be, I think when you put yourself in those situations where you have to get uncomfortable in training and maybe you're not necessarily realizing that it's happening, like you're not prepared for it. So it's like a surprise. I think on some level, you have to have some layer of like very like strong consistency outside of running, because if your life outside of running is pretty chaotic and then you're just trying to get this like tempo run in that feels really good because you want to have some sort of like small control over your life, and then something like comes up like all these other things I mentioned, that could be really difficult, right? But it's just kind of knowing where you're at in life and training and et cetera, et cetera. So at the end of the day, we all have things to work on. At the end of the day, I think we're all trying to do our best. At the end of the day, staying grounded in training and in racing, I think is going to help get the most out of you. What I've seen out of myself, what I've seen from other athletes is anytime that they can stay grounded or neutral on training or racing or what happens while they're racing or in the process to get there, if they stay relaxed in the moment, they often can do so much more than they think they can. So let's get into it. First phrase is, I trust the work I've done. I'm ready. I love this phrase. Why? Because you are reinforcing everything that you have done up until this point has gotten you here. And you are ready. You are giving yourself a little bit of a confidence boost while also reassuring yourself that every single thing that you've done has mattered all the time, all the investment, all the no's. I understand, totally understand. It's really hard to balance training, especially if you're marathon training, with all other aspects of life. And it can be very, very difficult to make it all happen. So typically what happens is the priority level shift in training, and training might move closer to the top and then other things might move a little bit closer to the bottom, and only, you know, knowing that that's for a season and priorities get to shift, they get to change. If you're someone who trains year round, like I have done over many, you still have to make a point for those priorities to shift. Otherwise, your life just becomes all about running and training, and that can be really lonely, and it can also lead to burnout, and it can lead to injury, and it can lead to a lot of like not great things. So I think it's really, really important to have the balance, have the shift in your priority list for sure. And I'm not just talking about like, okay, so the work I've done, I'm ready. The work that you've done in training, of course, you want to highlight those runs. You want to highlight those training runs, those weeks where you were like, heck yes, I have done it. I'm doing such a great job. I'm getting it done. Paces are starting to feel smoother. Yes, 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 yes. But you have to believe it. You have to tell yourself that you're ready to go, that, you know, we all want that an extra week or two in training. We all do. We all do. And we're never going to get it. Like if you start a marathon training cycle 14 weeks out, like that is plenty of time if you've been running and have a really strong base season ahead of like before you started training. You are so ready. Going into Chicago, I had 9 weeks total with, I don't know, it's kind of hard to talk like to describe what I was doing before. I wasn't running, and then I was just running really short distances, but I wasn't running any speed really since like the beginning of June. So it's kind of like this weird this really weird summer of running I was in. So I had 9 weeks to be like, quote unquote, officially training for Chicago. And the way that I told myself that I was ready was like, well, Des Linden said that she trains for the Boston Marathon in like 7 or 8 weeks. And I think even Kipchoge, or maybe it was Met, had trained for 6 weeks for one season. And I think they ended up, that was the year that he won it or something like that. And I just kept telling myself, like, if these elites can do it in a shorter period of time than I'm trying to do it, and I've been training year round, and I've been running high mileage, and I haven't been giving myself a break, which is why I'm at where I'm at right now anyways, like, I think I can do this. So I think it's like really important that you trust the work, not just in your training. It's also in all the training that you've done prior to this cycle. It's also all the work outside of running, the strength training, the visualization, the mantras, the journaling, the nutrition, the hydration, the pacing, the focus, all of it helps you on race day, and reminding yourself of all the work that you've done. Because I know it can be really tough to remember all the things that we do in training, because it's really easy to be like, oh, I didn't do anything, because it doesn't feel that way, because it feels normal to some extent, because maybe you run with a running group and you see everyone else doing the same thing, or you're really prominent on social media and oh my gosh, the Instagram running community is awesome. And we have some work to do because it only shows how easy things are, or it doesn't show the full picture. Remembering to trust everything that you've done to get there and to tell yourself that you're ready. A little pro tip is journaling throughout your training cycles. Having a running journal is super important. But going back and looking not just on your last training cycle and highlighting all the wins in and out of running shoes, but also all the other cycles that you've stacked to get to this point. When I was getting ready to run Chicago, I had to remind myself not just that, elite runners train for fewer weeks than I did to get ready for this, that I have peaked in marathon builds around week 9 and 10. So this is kind of my sweet spot anyways. But I went back and looked at all the races that I've run, all the cycles that I've been in, basically not stopping training while I was working with Nell. It was just always like you recover a little bit after your race and then you're into the next cycle. And some of that's my own doing because I always had another race on my schedule. That was something that I just always had. I was always planning like 18 months in advance for many years. It was like that. You would ask me, oh, what are you doing? And I guess for in current time, December of 27, I would like have an answer for you. It's here nor there. It's just what I was doing. So trusting the work, believing in yourself, telling yourself that you're ready, getting yourself hyped up, but staying grounded, staying calm, staying neutral, both can be true at the same time. So if you struggle with that, maybe you get your heart rate up a little bit higher because you're really excited, or you're nervous, which the nerves are just coming through as an excitement. Find a way to work on grounding yourself so your heart rate is staying lower in the starting corral. You're not hyping yourself up too much by believing in yourself, and then get ready to work. Phrase number 2 is stay patient. My race starts later. All right, this has a big asterisk on it because if you are racing the mile, if you are racing the 5K, even the 10K, your race doesn't start later. It starts now, but you can race smart. And that means not going out too fast. I recently raced a 5K in Denver, in Wash Park, my little safe space of tempo work. And it was my first time racing a 5K there, and the inner loop is 2.25 miles. It basically has a section of very flat to slight downhill. And then there's a side of the park that has quote unquote rollers. And there's 4 roller hills. The first 2 are very manageable, even at 5K pace. I was like, oh my God, I'm holding pace. This is so great. Well, I didn't know that at the time. I was like holding effort. Looking back on my pace chart, I was holding pace, which I was really proud of. The third mile, or the third roller hit, and it was a bigger roller. And that's when things started to go sideways. But you kind of get to finish on a flat-ish area. There's like a really tight turn right at the end, which I wish they would change that. But I guess all parks in Denver have that for 5K races. And so, anyways, I started out this 5K, and what I've noticed over the last year is that when I'm feeling really strong and feeling really good, when I start my intervals, I am running way too fast. Like, I'll start running, like, oh, I'm going to run hard. And I look down, I'm like, oh my God, you're at 5:15 pace. What are you doing? Like, pull back. I'm supposed to be, let's say, if it's a workout, it could be anywhere from like 6:30 to 6:50. In the 5K, that's exactly what happened. I ran 5:15 pace for a quarter mile. And so I went out way too fast, way, way, way too fast. And I spiked my lactate, which then ultimately made it was right around the halfway point where I just like died. You know that melting emoji? Like that was me. I felt like I was just like melting into the ground at Wash Park after a mile and a half. But I was holding 6:12-ish pace really well. I was really happy about that. And then I dropped down to like 6:30. I just like couldn't turn my legs over. I was absolutely done. And I think a lot of it was that I wasn't super patient. I just went out hard. And hard for me looks a lot different than it looked even a year ago when I raced a 5K in City Park. And so I have to be a bit more patient or aware of what I'm running at the start of these faster races. And I think that that's true for any of us. You want to go out hard in the 5K, you want to go out pretty even in the 10K, you want to go out really hard in the mile, right? But there is a level of staying patient. You just can't like go out and sprint like I did and then expect to race really well, like you're going to blow up. And that's exactly what happened to me. I thought I was going to come back in mile 3 and I just got slower. That happened. So if you're running, let's say you're running a half or a marathon, staying patient in the first mile, 2 miles of the half marathon, staying patient in the first 5K, 10K of the marathon is going to pay dividends later, right? Like your training cycle, you have been making deposits into your training bank, and ultimately on race day you want to withdraw that. You want to make a withdrawal, you want to cash that in. But you have to understand that like the first part of the race, you're still making those micro deposits that are going to pay off 10x in the last 5K or 10K of the race. Now, when I ran my 88:01 in Indianapolis in the fall of 2023, I knew I could run under 90. So I decided for the first 5K, actually, I remember this verbatim. It is wild what I remember out of my training with like certain races, certain workouts, certain interactions with Nell. I remember seeing in Training Peaks, and I don't think I talked to her. I know I didn't talk to her before this race because it was a tune-up. It wasn't like an A goal race. I was racing a marathon later. I just remember she texted me the day before, which happened to be my birthday. And she was like, just make sure that you're eating carbs today. And I was like, cool, cool. Got that. I am so good. There's like an awesome breakfast spot in Indianapolis. I'm spacing on the name of it. It's like Cafe Pikachu. It's so good. So if you're ever in Indianapolis running, racing, whatever, Cafe Pikachu, it's right next to the start and finish line. It's so good. And they have a ton of gluten-free options, which is amazing. And so I remember looking in Training Peaks and it was like first mile, 6:50. Very smart. What? So the 6:50 is the 90, right? Nell is basically saying like, okay, you could start out at 6:50 because I have faith in you that you're averaging well under 6:50, right? And as a coach, I kind of get it, right? It's a tune up. She just wants me to race, run on effort. Let's get that time. And then that's going to help position us for the next 5 weeks that I had for CIM training going into my marathon. So what did I do? I ran 6:50 for the first mile, and then 57, 6:55 for the first 5K, and then I started to work down. So I stayed patient. So patient. And I remember at one point looking back at mile 5 and like the sub 90 or the 90 pacer was running next to me. He kept bumping kind of into me. And I was just like, dude, what are you doing? You're bumping into me, which seems to happen in a lot of races. And two, yo, I know I'm running under 90 at this point, so like, why are you next to me? Which actually gave me fuel for the fire, and it made me like push the effort a little bit more. Um, and I ended up running probably at this point in stage in my career the best progression run I have ever run. My splits are beautiful, and each 5K I progressed down. Between the 5K and 10K, I was hovering right around 6:45. I think there was like a 6:37 in there, and I was like, gotta pull back. Whoa, that's a little too fast. It's like before the halfway point. From the 10K to the 15K, I was right around 6:40, like 6:38, 6:40, 6:41. From 15, or maybe I was, no, I like clicked off 6:33, 6:33, 6:34. And then for the last 10K, or the last 5K, I really went after it. My last mile came in at like 6:20, 6:18, something like that. My kick was like 6 flat. I had, a lot of gas at the end, and that's what you want. And I think ultimately, maybe because that first 5K was not sub 90, right? I still ran really, really well. I was a few seconds over 90, right? So when I crossed that mat, anyone who was tracking me probably saw like 90-10, 90-12, something like that. And it's like, oh, she's kind of there, but like also, yikes. And then each 5K, I just progressively got faster. And it was a really great experience because I got to work with other girls on the course, which is doesn't always happen for two reasons. One, I'm usually in no woman's or man's land. There's no one usually racing by me. And which is a really hard way to race. And two, if there are people around me, it's typically more men than women. But for whatever reason, at this point in the race, there were two women right ahead of me. And I was like, you just got to stay with them. And I think that's probably why I raced so well at the end. Like, I was kind of letting them. I was letting them like run. I was just staying with them, which takes less effort, even though you're running faster. So it really worked. I stayed patient and my race started later. It started, it was right around mile 9. I was like, okay, you have like 4 miles left at, what are we averaging? 6:30. So like, what does that equate to? 26 minutes of work? What can you do in 26 minutes of work or 24 minutes of work? Go do that. Just go do that. And that's what I did. I stayed really focused. I stayed really into it. I was very grounded. I was very patient. And my race started later. Same to be true at Chicago last year. Even though the last 10K wasn't at all what I thought it was going to be, I was actively pulling back in that first 20 miles. I remember dropping like low 640 a few times, and I'm like, oh, this is too fast for where I'm at right now in the race. I have to wait until mile 20. And then mile 20 is where I get to race the last 10K. My legs felt really great. My stomach ended up not, and that's okay. But staying patient really will help you later on in the race. I think phrase number 3 is run this mile well, or run this moment well. So, if you've been listening for a while, you know that I'm a big believer in chunking up the distance. This phrase can be used to either chunk up the distance or to be used to stay in the mile that you're in, stay in the rep that you're in, stay in the moment that you're in. The mile works extremely well when you're in training. I think when you're going through, let's say it's a 4-mile tempo, you're on the track and you're in reps, you're running around lakes and let's say you have 5 reps of something that you're looking to run, staying within that rep or staying within that mile is a really nice way to not get too ahead of yourself, to not get too anxious about what's ahead, but just running well now in the present where you're at right now. Don't think about what's to come. Now, in racing, this is highly beneficial, especially in the shorter distances. You can use this phrase to chunk up the race. So for the 5K a few weeks ago, That last mile was not fun. I got to tell you, I was working really hard to run 6:30 because I overran the first mile significantly and I couldn't really recover off of the last few rollers in Wash Park in mile 2. So I just kept telling myself, like, get to the trash can, get to the garbage can, get to the porta potty, just get to the next point and reset. And that helped the last mile because it wasn't fun, you know? I think specifically when you're in the pain cave, I think it can actually help more. Like, let's say I was holding 612 effort and my legs were toast and everything was just, it was a lactate party in my body, right? Like just micro chunking out the distances help maybe like if you have, let's say a half mile to go, but like you are there's lactate acid everywhere in your body. I don't care if you have like 5 steps or a half mile to go, it all sucks. So you gotta like chunk it out. This worked extremely well for me in the 10K race at Boulder Boulder. And it was actually Nell that was chunking it out for me because I think she could tell after the halfway point, which is on rollers. So obviously, hello, there are some clues here. The Boulder Boulder course is also just really tough. You're just running uphill like for all of it, basically. She could tell I wasn't recovering as well after the halfway point. And so she would chunk up like, especially when we were running through the neighborhoods, if you're familiar with the course, like, let's just get to the next turn. Let's get to the water table. Let's get up this hill. Let's recover down this hill. And it was so micro chunked that it helped me stay focused and the race went by so much faster than if I was like, oh my gosh, this is so hard and I have 3 miles to go. What am I going to do? Well, you're going to slow down and it's going to feel like forever. And then you're going to be disappointed in your race. So if you can stay super present and focused on where you're at, what you're doing, whether it's in training and staying in the mile, in the rep that you're in, if it's in a 5K, 10K race and you are micro chunking the heck out of it, if you are in the half and the marathon and you decide to take the mile approach until you need to chunk it, because I think specifically, if you are racing the half marathon the way you should be, you know, everyone races differently. So you will need to chunk the last section for sure. And the same is true in the marathon. It just depends when in the marathon your mind starts to get a little chatty. And that's when you probably need to start, you know, refocusing. And if the chatter still is there or you're noticing pacing slipping, that's when you need to start chunking out the rest of the marathon, which is pretty easy to do because there's usually so much going on, right? Like there is carnage in the last 10K. There are water tables, there are spectators, there are signs like you can use. There are timing mats everywhere because, you know, you have the timing mat at 20 and then again at the next, whatever the next 5K would be, which would be like at 21.7, 0.8, something like that. So using all of those resources to your advantage will help you chunk out the race. At the Chicago Marathon, it's really fun because around mile 25, you can see the last turn before you run up the hill and then make the final turn, which you don't have a lot of runway when you make the final turn. So you don't have a lot of like time to kick at all. So I always use that turn. Like at mile 25, it's like, okay, I can start to see people turning. I just have to go because I know the end is close. I can't see it because there's a few turns, but I know I'm going to get there and I'll be okay. Phrase number 4 is it will get hard at some point today, and that is normal. Let's normalize that racing should feel hard if you're truly racing. Now, if you are a first-time marathoner and you're like, yeah, I mean, it gets hard, but it's more hard like my legs get heavier, fatigued. It's not hard like pushing the pace. I think that's also normal because it's your first marathon. But if you're going out and you are racing something, like you are really making a strong effort to be focused, you have a pacing plan, it's gonna hurt. You have to normalize that because everyone else around you is feeling the exact same way. They may not be showing it externally. So, a lot of times when I'm coaching, specifically group coaching, because I get to see them in person, which makes that aspect of group coaching so much fun, I will say to them as they're running by me, whether it's on the track or if they're running tempo in the park, like, oh, you look really good. You look strong. You look relaxed. And then afterwards, they'll come up to me and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that because it felt so tough. And I'm like, oh, really? Your body language suggested that it felt very like comfortable. So I think one, a lot of it's in our head, right? Like, oh my gosh, this feels tough. And then because we say that, it's going to feel even harder. But if we can say, like, hey, this is normal, it's just intensity, which is a reframe of the word hard or tough, it's just intense. And then you start using some of your other phrases, like you can micro chunk, there's other skill sets to kind of use in these moments. You're able to flow through it. What we also know to be true about racing, specifically in the marathon, I haven't yet had this in the half marathon or ever heard of anyone feeling this way in the half marathon, is that in the marathon distance, there will be miles that feel hard. And then all of a sudden everything clicks again and you're like feeling good. So it's not like, oh my gosh, it feels hard at 16. That means 10.2 miles are going to feel really hard. No, it doesn't have to be that way. Actually, at Chicago, I talked about how I was having to pull back, right? With a lot of my pacing, the entire 20 for sure. And then I couldn't run fast enough in the last 10K. So that's cool. I specifically remember that it was 2 or 3 times where I ran a low 640, high 630. And I saw the time come through on my watch and I was like, oh, yikes. Or I was doing the math of like how far away I was from the mile marker. And I was like, oh, yikes. That was a little bit harder. I could feel the effort shift slightly. It's coming in fast. It's way too early for that. This is what I want to be running in the last 10K. So I'm going to pull back. And every time I pulled back, that next mile felt hard. And then I was like, oh no, what did I do? And then everything kind of like, worked out and I kind of settled back in. And then it was fine until the next same situation happened down the road. So I think it's so important to normalize that racing is hard. It's supposed to be hard. I think there's certain points on the course where it shouldn't be hard. If it's feeling hard in the first 10K or the first half of the marathon, that's not great. And sometimes you warm up, but most times you don't. If it gets hard in the 5K, in the first mile, that's very, very normal, right? It's just a matter of like, how long can I sustain this hard effort, which is very, very different from the longer distances. So normalizing it, I think, is really helpful, and normalizing all the people around you, because they may look cool, calm, and collected from the outside. Maybe not. We've all seen those race photos. I have my own. We're all in this together, everyone. But they may look really relaxed, and yet on the inside, they're like feeling the same that you are, right? So normalizing it is a huge, huge place to be. And then lastly, I think it's really important to remind yourself that it's a celebration. Racing gets to be fun. We choose to do this. We pay a lot of money to do this. Even if we're racing locally, I feel like even 5K bibs now are like $50, $60, $75. Like, it's wild. So today gets to be a celebration. Race day gets to be a celebration. It gets to be a celebration of all the work that you put into training, all the no's that you had to say no to, all the things that you said yes to, which could have been surrounded by your training, right? Like, I said yes to strength training. I said yes to sleep. I said yes to hydration, things like that. I think it's really, really important to remind yourself of all the good that you've created, and that race day really is a celebration. And when you remember to have fun and to smile and to give a few high fives out there, maybe interact with the crowd if you see a really funny sign, chances are it's not going to take away from your race. If anything, you are running relaxed, and that means you are going to be racing well because you are running relaxed, you're running smooth, the pace feels a little bit better. I remember running my very first Chicago Marathon in 2022, and there videos surfaced online of me running. I think I was in Chinatown, running in Chinatown, and I did this like Someone saw me and they were calling out my name, and I had great support that year. I think I had people at least at every 5K. It was so much fun. And I remember doing like hands up in the air, and I was like doing this woo woo woo, I feel good. And Nell saw the video and she was like, never do that again. It's like, but I was having fun out there, you know? And I think she was looking for a more like focused, really strong running form, be super dialed kind of approach, where I was running really well. I ran a 5+ minute PR. I ran a 3:15 that day. And I was having a lot of fun with the people that I got to see at every 5K. And that was one of those races where I just progressively got faster. It never really got hard. I ran out of runway. And I think there's a lot to say about that. Now, the same is true Chicago of 25. So around mile 18 or 19, I saw someone from Boulder. And in that moment, like leading up to seeing that person, and like, I had the biggest smile on my face during the first 20 miles for sure. And I remember just running through the crowds and running through downtown and running up and over like the tiny little bridges. And I could feel the big smile on my face. And if you're listening to this, you can probably tell I'm smiling right now just thinking about it. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I'm smiling. And I remember seeing this person, I did the exact same thing, except this time I like turned around. I was like running forward and I like did this whole turnaround and I put both hands up in the air and I was like, I feel good, which I felt so good. And I was like so ready to go. And then, of course, it didn't translate the same way that it did a few years ago when I ran. But all in all, I think it's a terrific way to race. I think you can stay focused, you can have a lot of fun, but remembering to smile and give a few high fives. I think, the shorter distances, it's a little bit harder to do that. I think at the 5K in Houston that I ran at the beginning of the year, there was someone early on, like within the first few minutes of running. And I'm unsure if it was someone that I coached or if it was someone who knows me from Instagram, because someone who knows me from Instagram mentioned it, but I was like, oh, I thought it was someone that I coached. But like, here's the thing, I acknowledged them in a really fun way. I like did this fist pump and I stuck out my tongue and like kind of did this, like, like I'm in this. But I stayed looking forward and I stayed like running really strong and hard. So I didn't deviate too much. I gave them a little something to acknowledge them, but it was really funny because I know I saw an athlete, Ellie, at the end of the race, and she got a video of me coming in on the last turn as like into the final kick. And she was like, oh, you didn't engage at all. You were so focused. And I was like, oh, yeah, at that point, I was still running hard and I was able to take some seconds off of my last mile. So I was like really focused, really engaged. And so, like, I didn't have any ounce of energy to like look up or wave or say hi or get like or be unfocused. Like, I was really feeling the effort. So I think they can both be true, right? It just kind of depends on when it lands in your race. If you're running something like the Boston Marathon, it can be throughout your entire race because you'll be running a bit more relaxed. You'll be having a lot of fun. There's a lot of different points on the course that you get to engage with, which is a lot of fun. I think that's one of the reasons why I love running majors so much, is that there's so many aspects to like the spectators, the signs, there's so many things to like be part of, where when you run smaller races, like I remember running the Mesa Marathon, and my coach at the time was out there for the golf tournament, the waste management golf tournament. So he came out that morning, and I remember he was like looking at the app as I'm like coming through, and I mean, he was just like, it was just him on the sidelines, right? And I was like, oh, hey, and those are fun too, but you just have to, there's just a little bit less that you get to engage with during those races. And that's okay, because sometimes we can't travel. Sometimes we have to do local races. Local races keep our community thriving. So they are really important to run, but it is kind of nice to have a nice mix of all of those things. I'll be running some local races for sure this year, and then probably something not local in the fall, which will be fun. that's today's episode. I think these 5 phrases are really going to help you, not just on your start line, but also in your training. Use them in your training. Like, get the experience, understand how it works. Think about, like, really be in it, right? Like, how does my body feel when I say things that are positive? How does my body feel when I reframe something? How does my body feel when I'm relaxed, when I'm grounded? All of these things matter. And I think the more in tuned you are with your body, with your mind, it's not only going to help your running and how to be flexible in your running when you need it to be, but it is going to help you on race day and kind of know when to go. Remember when I talked about being at mile 9 at the half marathon in Indianapolis? I knew at that point, based on how I felt in that part of the race, and I just run like a 6:30, 6:33. I was like, you got to go. Like, you have some energy left and like you can do anything for 26 minutes. You just got to go. And that's a really cool place to be. So the next time you're standing on a starting line, borrow one of these phrases and run the first few miles with intention. Maybe run all your miles with intention. Intention can look and be different. It doesn't have to look the exact same way throughout your entire race. If you want help learning how to execute and not just train, but really execute your racing, your workouts, the way that you up level, breaking through that plateau, you can find me at elevateyourrunning.com. There's a few coaching spots open, so I'd love to work with you. I'd love to elevate your training. I'd love to help you break through a plateau. I'd love to help educate you on more ways that you can get outside of your comfort zone to really get the most out of you. And hey, we have a lot of tune-ups this spring too. So I think these phrases will be very beneficial in your tune-ups as you head into your spring A goal race. I'm so excited for everyone. It feels like it's kicking off with Mesa. We had a little bit of a downtime between Houston and Mesa. Things are picking up again. It feels, as an athlete, it feels really exciting. As a coach, it also feels really exciting. And it feels like the time between Houston and Mesa wasn't quite long enough. Getting back into race season, it's going to be a good one. Have a great week, and I'll see you again next